At my sister's funeral, her caregiver pressed a small, locked box into my hands and whispered, "She wanted you to have this in private." I opened it with trembling fingers, and the moment I did, everyone in the room looked at me completely differently. What was inside changed everything. If you enjoy powerful family stories with twists you never see coming, make sure to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Clara Bennett. I'm 55 years old, a widow, and the older sister of Isabel, who had just been laid to rest that day. Isabel was 52, full of life and laughter even through her long battle with illness. She was the kind of person who could walk into a room and make it brighter. Though in her final years, she carried a heaviness she rarely spoke about. We grew up close, sharing secrets, dreams, and the weight of losing our parents too early. I always felt protective of her, but as we got older, she became the one people gravitated toward. Charismatic, strong-willed, always smiling. I admired her, but I also knew she hid more pain than most people realized. That morning at the funeral, the church was filled with family, friends, and neighbors. Flowers lined the pews, candles flickered, and soft music played in the background. People whispered condolences, hugged me tightly, and spoke of how wonderful Isabel was. I nodded, grateful, but inside, I felt hollow. Losing her left an ache that words couldn't touch. When the service ended, I expected the usual gathering, quiet conversations, shared memories, and the slow walk of grief. But instead, Marian, Isabel's caregiver, approached me. Marian had cared for Isabel during her illness, and they had grown close. She looked at me with serious eyes, holding a small, locked box. In a low voice, she said, "Clara, she wanted you to have this, but only in private." My heart skipped. Why me? Why in private? As I held that box in my hands, heavy with both metal and meaning, I had no idea that opening it would not only reveal Isabel's truth, but also change how everyone around me saw me and her. As I stood there in the church with that small locked box in my hands, I could feel its weight pressing down on me. Not just the weight of the metal, but of questions I wasn't ready to face. My fingers traced the edges, cold and smooth, while Marian's words echoed in my mind. "She wanted you to have this, in private." I looked up and realized that people were already watching. My brother David stood by the altar with his arms crossed, his eyes narrowing as he noticed the exchange. Isabel's two grown children, Rachel and Peter, were whispering to each other, their eyes darting toward me. A few distant cousins leaned closer, curiosity written across their faces. Whispers spread quickly in a room like that. I could almost feel the questions forming in their minds. Why Clara? Why not the children? Why not the husband? It was as though Marian had handed me not just a box, but a spotlight that I had never asked for. I wanted to slip the box into my bag, pretend it was nothing, and deal with it later in the privacy of my home. But the stares, the whispers, and the silence growing around me made that impossible. I could feel the tension building, and it wasn't just coming from the others. It was inside me too. For a moment, I considered walking out the door with it, saying my goodbyes quickly, and avoiding the uncomfortable eyes that followed me. But grief held me in place. This was my sister's funeral. This was my last chance to stand in the same space as her body, surrounded by people who had loved her in their own way. Leaving early with a mysterious box would only make the whispers grow louder. I looked at Marian, hoping for some explanation, but she only placed her hand gently on my arm and said softly, "She trusted you." That didn't give me peace. It gave me more questions. What had Isabel trusted me with? Why had she chosen me instead of her children? Why now, when she couldn't explain it herself? As I sat back down in the pew with the box clutched in my lap, my mind swirled with memories. I thought of the times when Isabel had looked like she wanted to tell me something important. The night before one of her hospital stays, when she held my hand a little too long and whispered, "One day, you'll understand." Or the moment when she stared out the window during a family gathering and sighed, "There's more you don't know." At the time, I thought she was speaking about her illness, but maybe it had been something else all along. Rachel, her daughter, walked over and sat beside me. She leaned close and asked, "What did Marian give you?" Her voice wasn't angry, but it carried the sharp edge of suspicion. I didn't know how to answer. Just something your mom wanted me to have, I said quietly. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Why only you? She pulled back before I could reply, leaving me with the guilt of a secret I hadn't even uncovered yet. The box itself became a symbol of all the unspoken words between my sister and me. My heart ached as I thought about how many times I had brushed off her hesitations, too busy or too tired to press her for answers. Now the answers were here, locked inside a small box that suddenly felt heavier than I could carry. I tried to focus on the kind words people were saying as they shared stories about Isabel. They spoke of her generosity, her laugh, the way she made others feel seen. But I couldn't shake the thought that while everyone remembered her one way, there was another side to her that only I was about to discover. And once I opened that box, I couldn't put the truth back inside. The tension in the room thickened as more people noticed the box. A cousin asked, "What's that?" in a voice that carried farther than she intended. David shot me a look that demanded answers. Even the pastor glanced my way with curiosity. I felt trapped. Part of me wanted to stand up and declare that this was personal, that Isabel's wishes were for me alone. But another part of me feared that if I kept it secret, the family would turn against me, convinced I was hiding something from them. As I sat there, torn between duty to my sister and the pressure of my family's eyes, I realized the real conflict wasn't about the box at all. It was about trust. Isabel had chosen me, and in doing so, she had placed a burden on my shoulders that I wasn't sure I was strong enough to carry. Should I honor her wish for privacy, or should I open the box here and now, letting everyone see what she had kept hidden for so long? The questions clawed at me, and I knew I couldn't delay the decision much longer. I sat in that pew with the box pressed tightly against my chest, feeling as though the walls of the church were closing in on me. The whispers around me had grown louder, though no one dared speak directly. I could sense their questions hanging in the air. I didn't blame them. Funerals often stir curiosity, but this locked box, handed to me and no one else, had created a storm of suspicion. I tried to steady my breath, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling. What if the box contained something that changed the way everyone remembered Isabel? What if the truth inside it brought more pain than peace? My sister had carried secrets, that much I knew, but I never thought she would ask me to bear them in front of everyone. Marion, the caregiver, stood at the back of the room. Her face was calm, her eyes steady, as though she knew this moment would come. When our gazes met, she gave me a small nod, urging me to do what I already knew I had to. Open the box. I rose slowly, and all eyes followed me as I walked toward a side room off the main hall. The box felt heavier with each step, as though it carried not just paper or objects, but the very weight of my sister's soul. Behind me, I could hear the shuffle of footsteps. My brother David, and then Rachel and Peter. They weren't going to let me slip away in private. They wanted answers too. The small side room smelled faintly of flowers and candle wax, quieter, but not free from the tension that clung to me like a shadow. I placed the box on a wooden table, my fingers lingering over the cool metal. For a moment, I hesitated. I thought about taking it home, about respecting Isabel's wish for privacy, but then Rachel's voice broke the silence. "Open it," she said firmly. "If Mom gave you that, we deserve to know what's inside too." Her words pierced me. Did they deserve it? Isabel hadn't chosen them. She had chosen me. And yet, I could feel their stares burning into me, daring me to defy them. I whispered under my breath, more to myself than anyone else. "Why me, Isabel? Why not them?" My voice cracked, carrying the weight of grief and confusion. I turned the box over in my hands, and that's when I noticed a small latch underneath, almost hidden from sight. My heart raced as I pressed against it. With a quiet click, the base slid open slightly, revealing a small brass key taped to the inside. Everyone leaned in as I peeled it free. David muttered, "Of course she gave you the key. She always trusted you more than anyone." There was bitterness in his tone, but I let it pass. The key fit perfectly into the lock, and as I turned it, I felt a final surge of hesitation. Once I opened this box, there would be no going back. Whatever was inside would belong to all of us. Not just me. I thought of Isabel's last days, of the way she would grip my hand and look like she wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. I remembered the night she told me, "Clara, one day you'll understand everything." This had to be what she meant. I drew a long, shaky breath and lifted the lid. The hinges creaked, the sound so sharp it made me flinch. Inside, I saw neatly folded letters tied with a ribbon, a stack of photographs, and a sealed envelope with my name written across it in Isabel's familiar handwriting. Gasps filled the room behind me. Rachel stepped closer, her voice low but firm. "Read it," she urged. I touched the envelope with trembling fingers. My name, written by Isabel's hand, looked both comforting and haunting. She had meant for me to open it, and I could almost hear her voice whispering, "It's time." I broke the seal, unfolded the letter, and my eyes fell on the first line. "Clara, if you're reading this, then I am gone. I trusted you with this because you always carried my secrets with kindness. Now I ask you to carry one more, not for me, but for the truth." I stopped reading and looked up at the others. Their faces were pale, expectant, waiting for me to go on. At that moment, I knew the turning point had come. I had to decide whether to keep Isabel's words to myself, honoring her request for privacy, or to speak them aloud in front of the family who clearly wouldn't rest until they knew. I folded the letter carefully and pressed it to my chest. "She wanted me to have this," I said softly, "and I will honor her wish." The room fell silent, a mix of disappointment, confusion, and unease. Rachel shook her head in disbelief. David muttered something under his breath. But Marion, standing quietly in the corner, gave me another nod. The decision was made. I had chosen to respect Isabel's trust, even if it meant angering the others. And though my heart pounded, I felt a strange calm settle over me, because I knew whatever was written in that letter, whatever truths the box held, it was mine to carry first. The air in that side room was so thick with tension, I could almost taste it. My hands still clutched the letter against my chest, and for a long moment, I couldn't bring myself to read further. My sister's words felt too heavy, too sacred to spill into the open with everyone's eyes fixed on me. But I also knew that if I held them back, I would only create more suspicion, more whispers about what Isabel had chosen to hide. Rachel stepped closer, her voice sharp. "What does it say, Aunt Clara? What was Mom keeping from us?" Her tone wasn't just curious, it was demanding, the way a daughter speaks when she feels something is being taken from her. Peter stood just behind her, arms folded tight across his chest, his face unreadable, but his jaw clenched. I looked at them both, then at David, who still stood near the door, watching silently. I could see the question burning in his eyes too. They all wanted answers. But Marion, standing slightly apart from the rest, caught my gaze and gave me that steady, almost knowing nod. It was as if she were reminding me, "Isabel trusted you." Finally, I unfolded the letter fully and began to read aloud, my voice shaking, but clear enough to carry in the quiet room. "Clara, if you're holding this letter, then my time has ended. I asked Marion to give you the box because you were the only one I could trust to carry my truth with dignity. For years, I've carried a secret that I couldn't bring myself to share openly. I didn't want to burden my children or tarnish the way they remembered me, but you always saw me as I really was." I stopped and looked up. Rachel's eyes widened, her lips pressing into a thin line. Peter shifted uncomfortably. David leaned forward, as though he were afraid to miss a single word. I continued, "You remember when I stopped speaking to Robert, my husband, so suddenly? Everyone assumed it was because of the illness, but that wasn't true. I found out something that broke me. He betrayed me years ago, and worse, he betrayed our family. I discovered papers, bank transfers, and photographs. I never confronted him. I didn't want to destroy Rachel and Peter's childhood with the truth, so I carried the shame silently. But I couldn't carry it to my grave." The words nearly stopped in my throat. My eyes lifted from the page to see Rachel's face drain of color. "No," she whispered. Peter shook his head, muttering, "This isn't right." She wouldn't, but I could only keep reading. I pulled the stack of papers and photographs from the box, spreading them across the table. Old bank statements, receipts, and letters, each one confirming what Isabel had written. Evidence of money siphoned away, of lies told to cover it. Proof that the man who had once been respected in our town had betrayed not only Isabel, but his own children. Rachel covered her mouth with her hand, staring at the documents as if they might vanish if she blinked hard enough. Peter reached for one of the photographs, then dropped it back into the pile as though it burned his fingers. David cursed under his breath, running a hand over his face. But there was more. I turned back to the letter. Clara, I couldn't face the humiliation while I was alive. I let people believe I was cold or distant in those years, when really, I was just trying to protect my children from the truth. I need you to understand why I left part of my estate to the women's shelter. I wanted to give others the strength I never had, and I know you'll make sure that choice is respected. My children may not forgive me right away, but someday they'll understand. My hands shook as I lowered the letter. The room was silent, except for Rachel's quiet sobs. Her shoulders shook as she buried her face in her hands. Peter stood frozen, staring at the table, his breathing uneven. David finally spoke, his voice rough. She carried this all those years, and never said a word. He looked at me with something like guilt in his eyes, as if realizing he had misjudged Isabel's silence for pride instead of pain. I wanted to reach for Rachel, to comfort her, but I knew she wasn't ready. Her eyes darted to me, filled with confusion and a hint of anger. "Why you?" she demanded. "Why did she give it to you and not me?" I swallowed hard. "Because she wanted to protect you. She didn't want you to carry this while she was alive. She trusted me to carry it for her now." The words hung in the air, heavy with both grief and truth. Slowly, Marion stepped forward and rested a gentle hand on Rachel's shoulder. "Your mother loved you more than you can imagine. She asked Clara because she knew Clara would honor her, not judge her." Rachel broke into sobs then, collapsing into her brother's arms. Peter, who had been silent, finally whispered, "She was stronger than we thought." For the first time since the funeral began, the way they looked at me was different. Not with suspicion, not with anger, but with a kind of raw recognition. They saw me now as the one Isabel had trusted most. And though the truth hurt, though it changed the way they thought of their father and their mother, it was also a kind of freedom. I closed the box gently and placed my hand on top of it. The secret was no longer mine alone. It belonged to all of us now. But the choice Isabel had made to trust me above everyone else had shifted something in the room. They would never look at me the same way again. When the room finally emptied and the papers were gathered back into the box, I sat in silence, staring at the polished wood lid that now carried so much meaning. My heart was heavy with the truth Isabel had carried for so long, but at the same time, there was a strange lightness in knowing she had trusted me to reveal it. It was as though she had passed the torch of her strength to me in her final act. The days after the funeral were not easy. Rachel and Peter avoided me at first. They were hurt, confused, and angry, not just at their father, but at their mother for keeping this secret, and at me for being the one she chose to confide in. I understood their silence. They needed time to process. How could anyone absorb so much loss and betrayal in the same breath? David, my brother, came to visit me a week later. He sat at my kitchen table, sipping his coffee with a faraway look in his eyes. "Finally," he said, "I thought she was shutting us out. I thought she was cold. But now I realize she was protecting us." He looked down at his hands, shaking his head. I misjudged her all these years. His words broke something loose inside me, and I started to cry. I had thought the same thing myself at times, that Isabel's distance was her way of pushing us away. But now I understood that it was sacrifice, not pride, that kept her silent. And in her silence, she had carried a burden no one should bear alone. Weeks passed, and slowly, Rachel and Peter began to come around. Rachel called me late one evening, her voice trembling. "Aunt Clara, I was angry at first, but I know Mom loved me. I know she wasn't trying to hurt us." Her words were like balm to a wound. I reassured her that her mother's love was never in question, that everything Isabel did was rooted in love, even the decision to give me the box instead of them. Peter visited next, bringing the box with him. He placed it on my dining table and said, "Mom trusted you, so I trust you too. Keep it safe. When I'm ready, I'll read every word, but not now." His voice cracked, and in that moment, I saw the little boy he once was, holding his mother's hand at the park. I reached across the table and squeezed his arm. "Whenever you're ready," I told him. The family's perception of me had shifted. At first, they saw me as the gatekeeper of a painful secret, someone standing between them and the truth. But with time, they began to see me as Isabel had seen me, a protector, someone strong enough to hold the burden until they could bear it themselves. The box no longer divided us. It became the bridge that helped us understand Isabel's choices and the quiet courage she carried until her last day. For me, the aftermath was filled with reflection. I thought about my sister constantly, not just about her pain, but about her strength. She had chosen to live with dignity, to shield her children from truths that might have crushed them too soon. And when her time came, she chose me to carry that truth forward. It wasn't a gift, and it wasn't a punishment. It was trust. The kind of trust only siblings can share after a lifetime of love and struggle. I learned something powerful through this. Grief isn't just about losing someone, it's about discovering the pieces of them they leave behind. Sometimes those pieces are beautiful memories. Sometimes they are painful truths. But either way, they shape us. They remind us that love is not simple and family is not perfect. Love is messy, complicated, and often filled with silence we don't understand until it's too late. Isabel's box taught me that truth has a way of coming to light, even if it's after someone is gone. And when it does, we have a choice to let it divide us or to let it bring us closer. I chose the latter. I chose to honor her not by hiding from what she revealed, but by carrying it with the same quiet courage she showed me. Now, whenever I see that box resting on the shelf in my home, I don't just see secrets. I see my sister's face, her laughter, her tears, her love. I see her trust in me. And that, above all else, is what I will carry for the rest of my life. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and share in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your story too.